Joins us live in the studio, followed by D-Bed director Jimmy Tokioka. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. It is a busy day, and our guest here today always gets a lot of comments, and we always tend to break news, so we are excited to speak to the governor in just a few moments. But we always want to encourage all of you watching to head over to Facebook and to insert your questions and comments that you may have for the governor.
Yeah, and joining us now, of course, is the governor, Josh Green. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you.
Let's start with what Ryan teased right off the top, and that was the Trump tariffs. We have seen this escalation in language today, but now it does seem like there is a pullback. Hard to keep up. I have whiplash following all this news. I'm sure you do too. Bottom line, how is a potential trade war threatening or not threatening Hawaii?
It has a pretty big impact. You know, tomorrow we'll see what the Council on Revenues tells us, but the tariffs combined with kind of the pullbacks and then the reinstitution of new threats makes for a lot of uncertainty. It will overall damage our tourism economy because if there's a conflict with Canada, fewer of those individuals will travel here, and they're a big part of the people that we welcome. So revenues go down. Also, we're in a housing crisis, and if there's extra cost for aluminum, steel, wood, costs go up. And it's just really tricky to navigate. We will do our best. That's the federal government's approach right now. And I've got to tell you, it's a concern because it's also affecting the stock market for working Americans. It's affecting what their plans are for the future. That also affects tourism. So there's just so many reasons that we'd be better off with a stable approach. I can only manage so many things as far as the budget goes. So we're in the middle of our own budget process. Our legislature has to make decisions. We will hold back about $200 million in advance of whatever final decisions they make on cuts. And that will help us secure our future, keeping people working, keeping Medicaid intact. But all of it's pretty disruptive.
You know, with all of this talks of tariffs and the uncertainty, there's also, of course, the word recession that is going around that is also being spoken by the administration themselves. With noting what might come in the future, and as we look at forecasts and models, is there anything that you're predicting for the state's economy and budget, looking at the rainy day fund, any other sources that could assist if and when we start seeing this decline in our economy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now we have $1,580 million or so in the rainy day fund. The legislature will likely park an additional $200 million in advance of the decisions on the next budget for the federal government, which starts October 1. They're also, not there yet. They could force us into a shutdown. So that's a question. But that rainy day fund will be available to us if we go into deeper crisis. My approach with our team has been this. We don't want any people who are working to lose their capacity to work. People say warm bodies. That means people in jobs, because we can always get rid of vacant positions, but we don't want anyone to lose their job, number one. Number two, we don't want kids to lose services. We don't want food programs, for instance, like SNAP programs, to be vacated. And there's some threats about that because we can't have hungry children. And then finally, we're going to have to protect our healthcare system. Our healthcare system is heavily dependent on Medicaid dollars. 1 out of 3 of our people are Medicaid. And so those are 3 of our priorities among many others. We will set aside time for special sessions if in case the budget's not resolved at the federal level yet, by the time our legislature finishes, and then we can come in. We're hopeful that we don't have to do that much repair and maintenance to our own budget, but we'll do it. I have said a couple times, I think I can get us through about 2 years of this kind of back and forth, up and down from the federal government. But beyond that, I don't know what we would do. Now, there's another big piece of this, and that's just direct cuts to university and research. And those monies can't be fully replaced because we get $3.7 billion from the federal government every year. And so I'm fighting back against that day in and day out.
You know, you mentioned the university, UH Manoa, now among 60 schools under investigation for anti-Semitism. We saw Columbia earlier this week lose hundreds of millions of dollars, is my understanding, for their budget from the federal government. Could UH be in a similar circumstance?
So I woke up to that news this morning at 3 in the morning. I was on the phone with the White House by about 4:30 in the morning. I got someone at the highest level, let's just say that, essentially, right beneath the president. We seem to have resolved that. I explained that though there was a little back and forth, of course, during the recent war in Gaza, I explained that we are not an institution that is anti-Semitic. Though there was a little conflict, it paled in comparison to what's gone on in other universities. They assured me that the University of Hawaii is not on the chopping block for anti-Semitism. I spoke after that meeting with the Deputy Chief of Staff for the White House. I then spoke with the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs. So these are cabinet posts, and we're giving them a letter to fortify our position. But they assured me we're not going to see those cuts. But again, it's harrowing. Every day you wake up and a couple $100 million is on the line. We can't have that. So I think I stopped that one. But I suspect we're going to see a bit of this over and over again. And of course, with the thousands of people that have been told they're going to lose their jobs, we have to hire some people so our people are okay. They're healthy. They can pay their mortgages. So it's just every day. But that one seems to be kind of dealt with.
Are there any other direct cuts, departments, or services that concern you the most, or that look the most vulnerable at this point? I mean, you talked about your efforts with the University of Hawaii, but beyond that, is there anything else that you sense that it's something that you need to keep an eye on as you kind of navigate this time?
Well, just today, I mean, it's kind of always in the moment, but the SNAP funds, food subsidies, that worries me if we see that cut, because that's direct dollars. I can't imagine anyone's going to be heartless enough to cut that, but if they are, we're going to fight back, and I am seeking some philanthropic support too, but that's a lot of money. It could be as much as $70 million, 70. In addition to that, the question of Medicaid. So if Medicaid cuts went the way they did in the previous term for the president, it could cost us $250 million a year to keep people and their benefits intact. Now, one of the reasons that this is important to us is that since 1 out of 3 of our people are on Medicaid, if we saw really deep cuts in revenues, that jeopardizes all of our rural hospitals. And we have a lot of rural hospitals. That would happen all across the country, by the way. Rural hospitals, as I explained to the White House and the governors across the country, will all be in jeopardy because patients who go to rural hospitals often are Medicare or Medicaid at very high percentages. If you see cuts in those programs and those rural hospitals don't have enough money to survive, they close. If they close, huge parts of the country don't have access to health care. In fact, that map looks exactly like the red map of middle America that leaned towards President Trump. And so I was just very direct as a health person. That's what you're asking for. So I'll be fighting that back. There's just so many things. Okay, you look at the tariffs, right? If the tariffs go forward on China, we had $250 million of imports from China. If the rates of those goods go up by 25%, that's going to be passed on to our consumers. And you know how expensive it already is to buy eggs and to buy basic products. So they can't afford that. People are having a hard time affording that. That's one thing. If they cut the Department of Education, which is 11% of our Department of Education budget comes from the feds, that's like 1,100 full-time workers that will be in flux. And we can't have that either. This is the group of people that care for those who have intellectual disabilities, for our special needs kids. We're going to have to care for them. So we're going to have to come up with those resources. So I'm trying to find a peaceful space, best I can, to fight for Hawaii over and over again. But I'm just hoping that none of these cuts become a tsunami that we can't recover from.
There is the financial aspect. There's also some policy changes. We are seeing more ICE enforcement. This is the Immigration Services. We saw, a child removed from a school and I'm assuming deported out of the Big Island. What is your feeling about how much local police officers should be cooperating with these raids? How do we make sure that the officers themselves are safe in these situations? Well, what is the administration's policy when it comes to ICE?
So our policy is we should only be supportive of that if there's a serious criminal involved. So if someone has committed significant crimes, of course, we help with our local police, anyone, to get those individuals under control. The challenge is, in that case, there were 2 judicial warrants that went out to essentially capture somebody who was a migrant, who is an illegal immigrant. But once they get there, they end up bumping into other people that, probably are farm workers and didn't have proper citizenship. And then it cascades into those communities. And finally, the children of those individuals don't want to get off the school bus because they're so afraid. That's what really happens. It's heartbreaking. Today, our Attorney General, who's been doing a very good job, Ann Lopez, is at the FBI offices all day working out and reinforcing the details that we had in place before the new president was sworn in, to reassert that, yes, we will work with ICE when there are serious criminals, but no, please do not cause societal disruption just because there is a movement on the mainland. Our immigrants are working people in our community for the most part, and they are paying taxes, they're working in farms, they're working in hospitality, and we are short on workers also. This is going to bubble up across the country because the ag sector is going to be devastated, and so will any number of other industries. It's very tough. The biggest concern I have is separating kids from families. In this case, the children went with the mom to a hotel. She is a citizen, but I'll tell you, there's an infinite number of permutations on this challenge, and people's lives are being destroyed. That's not what we do in Hawaii. In Hawaii, we have families that are deeply integrated from all nations, walks of life, ethnicities, and our values have been to integrate people. So I'm hopeful that people will take a page out of our book and not disrupt that fabric of society. Instead, just go after the very bad players.
I want to go back to when you mentioned the conversation that you had with the White House this morning, and having those types of conversation as a governor of a democratic state. You yourself, as someone who has criticized the president, who has spoken out against some of his nominees, has that influenced or impacted your relationship with the White House? How do they receive you, and maybe anyone else, other governors who may push back against this administration? Because we have seen times where the president has, publicly spoken out against some governors. How would you gauge your relationship with the White House and its potential impacts to Hawaii?
It's kind of interesting. So, I was at the White House with Jamie a week or two ago, and I did have a chance to speak with the president. And I'll just kind of give you an overview because it's private what we said. But I said to the president, I'm not going to criticize him directly, provided that we care for people. In fact, I'm not going to criticize him directly much at all, but I am going to speak up for what's right and wrong, and that's usually going to be a reflection of what the directors or secretaries do. He said, and it was quite interesting, as long as I'm not being rude to him, I should do whatever I think is best regarding his secretaries, to which I said, well, there are some fundamental differences of opinion that I have on health matters, at least with the Secretary of Health. And he laughed and he said, have at it, as long as you're leaving me out of it. I'm basically summarizing, which was good. And then we spent several hours talking over a lot of different issues. There are things that we can find common ground on. I'm working on them right now, working with them right now on a project, for instance, to protect our waters, to do clean water work where cesspools are involved. It's a small business benefit because we would do the work. It also is a good environmental policy, and they were enamored of that. I've been on the phone with his number 2 over and over and over again, so they appear to like the approach where I can be direct with the president. I'm not going to be petty. I'm not going to dispute who is the president of the United States, but I am going to at least represent our state's values. And it was effective today. I mean, they appreciated directness. They just don't like things to be caustic.
One of the policy disagreements I would imagine between you and the president, of course, is climate. And we are seeing a number of cuts to federal workers in the climate space. What are your concerns for how that could impact us for our climate energy goals, but also just protecting our forests and our oceans?
Right. So if they make a lot of cuts in kind of parks positions and services there, I'm going to hire those individuals through our Operation Hire Hawaii program to go into DLNR. We've already had 1,239 applications into our program to hire people that were losing their jobs. It's pretty incredible. Across all sorts of disciplines, environmental positions, 70 corrections people applied, 67 people applied that work on trails and outdoor activities, a couple hundred people on tech. There's a lot of techies out there that have applied. So that's been good. The concern I have about our renewable energy goals is that they're not going to be very supportive of renewable energy. I spent an hour and 15 minutes with Secretary Wright, who is the Secretary of Energy, and he's a very intelligent person, super successful, but he leans towards things like LNG and nuclear power. So, we do have a proposal, as you guys covered, that would use a small amount of liquid natural gas as a bridge to our renewables out in 2045. You see what I'm doing here? I'm keeping our goals out there that will be long after when I'm serving and long after when President Trump is serving, but it would give us an opportunity to have a bridge which they may finance. So I don't want us to lose opportunities to other states if there is money involved, because if we were to do nothing, let's just say we walked away from the table and they pulled away all of the benefits that we have for solar and wind, we would be left continuously using oil, very, very dirty oil, and we'd be set back 5 years, or well, at least 4 years, I should say, during the current administration, and it wouldn't be helpful because we would not reduce carbon. So I was strategically positioning us with an option, just an option of modest use of LNG to get us through this period. I can't tell you for sure what they're going to decide, except that I just don't like giving up 5 years here and there towards our goals. And so I'm going to be very pragmatic about things. I hope people will understand that.
I want to switch gears as we transition a little bit more into home and what's happening with the Hawaii State Legislature. Over the last few sessions, you have really tried to advocate for a green fee, a visitor impact fee. Wanted to get your sense on where things are right now with that, your conversation with lawmakers and how this policy has evolved over the years to where it is now.
Right. So this year, as you know, we pulled together the climate advisory team. They gave us a good report that showed, if we're being honest with ourselves, we should be spending about $500 million a year on the impacts of climate change and making sure that we're ready for potential fires, that we're dealing with beach erosion, that we're dealing with all of the effects of climate change. So from the start, it would have been great 2 years ago if we had passed the climate impact fee. Where we are today is the House and Senate. I met with the Speaker and the Senate President today, both. They have both agreed to bills. They're slightly different on each side. That's the process. It looks like the best way to go is a 1% increase in the TAT, the Transit Accommodation Tax, which means that people who come here, they would pay 1% extra when they go stay at hotels or short-term rentals. That would generate about $80 million per year, plus some fees on when people use points and whatnot to get free rooms. That can generate another $80 million, we believe, giving us about $160 million a year to deal with these problems. And the final thing that we could do, and I think is a good idea, we'll see if we do it, is take the interest from the rainy day fund that I told you about, the over, it's like over $1.6 billion. And if we take that money and that interest, that's another, at 5%, $70 million a year. But that money, if bonded, creates a lot of money. For every $4.5 million in a fund, you can get a bond for $100 million, and we can solve our climate change and our climate impact problems. That's what we need to do. In this case, we simply have to have that bill and that policy because we've gotten the other big policies through these last couple of years, like the tax break, the homeless projects, the housing programs, but this is a big one.
Just a follow-up to that, we have a lot of Kama'aina that travel between the islands. And so we had questions from family members in Hilo on the Big Island who say, if this fee is added and they come to Oahu, are they having to are they going to be also seeing this 1% increase? Is there a way to maybe protect Kama'aina from this?
There is. We can give additional credits, and we've talked about that, like increasing the food tax credit and other credits that we can contain on their state taxes. So that is something we can do. Keep in mind, this is a really small number because let's say we're doing a staycation. Like I'll take the family on a staycation this spring break. Even if you spend $400 a night for 3 nights, $1,200, you're paying 1%. You're talking about, in this case, $12, and it's not nothing. But we're talking about $80 million coming in from the outside. So it's pretty necessary. Plus, we benefit personally when we deal with all of our challenges from climate change. But I am definitely open to giving people more tax credits, and we did do an enormous tax break, well over $5 billion for that reason exactly, to make it more affordable to live in Hawaii.
I want to ask you about the Salary Commission, State Salary Commission recommending some pretty hefty pay raises, 35 to 48% over the next 6 years for judges, top state executives, and lawmakers. What are your thoughts about these pay increases?
So my feeling was from the start they were too large. I spoke out directly about that to the commission. They came in much higher before this. This is over 6 years, so people understand. Here's the circumstance where we stand. I need to attract judges to serve, and I need to attract directors to serve to run the government. And the private sector pays 3, 4, 5 times as much. So I know that it has to be modest because people are struggling out there. But if I can't get even anywhere near the ballpark of the private sector, it's very hard to get someone to run our Attorney General's office or to run the Department of Transportation. Now, let me just be very direct regarding the Office of the Governor. The initial proposals were enormous increases, 50 or 60%. I objected strongly to that. They cut it steeply down. And if there is any increase over a small percentage for me or Lieutenant Governor, Jamie and I will be giving the extra money to charity. Because it's not about money for me, it's about public service. But I do have to put together a cabinet. I do have to put together a judiciary. And then finally, the legislators, their salary increase would not go into effect for 2 years. So they're not directly going to be voting on something for themselves right now. That's the way the system works. And that has been a safeguard against really steep increases. All of these increases are much lower, by the way, than what the county council got. They're much lower than what OHA got, which is good. But any increases I know are going to make some people upset. I'm just trying to make sure we have a government that can run. And keep in mind, this morning I did what I could to save $1 billion for the state of Hawaii. These increases are really just meant to get good people going forward.
I want to follow up on another hot topic at the legislature, and that's the status of Aloha Stadium. And when we're looking now at costs and hearing where estimates are, based on where it was 6 years ago, it's nearly doubled to about $650 million now. We're going to have DBIT Director Jimmy Tokioka coming on after this to also speak about this, but wanted to get your thoughts on where things are and the status of the project moving forward.
Yeah, so we have Stanford Carr, who won the bid, and we want Stanford to go forward and build us a great stadium and a lot of housing around the stadium. That's very important. I have asked a private equity group who I won't name today, but they are in sports industries, to consider giving us $400 million as partners. There's an important thing that people should know, and that's that the stadium project, the entertainment district, is also called an enterprise zone. And that means that those who build there will not pay capital gains taxes after 10 years. So I am doing what I can to lure some very affluent partners into the project. And, I have some hope that one of the 2 or 3 groups that I've approached will ultimately partner with us, because building a very, very modest stadium may not do the trick. Building a stadium with the $350 to $400 million we have, remember you have to also demolish the previous stadium, cost about $40 million, would be so modest. I'm not sure we would have adequate capacity for, real participation in Division I football games and concerts and so on. we really need a partner. And I was on the phone with some people that will knock your socks off, of course, if they come on as partners on this project. I want this because it'll be good for our high school kids to aspire to play championship games at. I want it to bring concerts. I want it to bring UFC competitions, and there's a little hint as to some of the group that I'm working with to get some extra participation. I want World Cup soccer matches and rugby league championships and all those things here for our people. So I think it's a good investment. But based on your earlier questions, there's a whole lot in flux about how much money is going to be here.
Yeah. We will definitely talk to Director Tokioka about that. I want to ask you about a bit of news that we understand is sort of breaking today, which is that the status of Hinano Rodriguez for the State Commission on Water Resource Management. A number of senators had opposed this nomination. What is the status? What is his status right now?
He withdrew his name. This is a gentleman, just so everyone knows, who is extraordinarily qualified on conservation matters. I think he served in DLNR for 18 years at SHPD. But some of these nominations become contentious, and I'm not going to point fingers. I will go back and either review the last list or perhaps new names will come to me. But this is an ongoing part of the conflict over water rights. And what I would say is we, as in me, my administration, the legislators, the community in Maui, should not view ourselves as adversaries. The adversaries right now are those that are proposing multi-billion-dollar cuts to what we have available here in our state, across the country. Some of the policies that are being proposed dwarf these challenges. And the people that we have had nominated are utterly thoughtful Hawaii leaders. So try going and wrestling with the policies that are coming out of D.C., and I'll tell you, it's much worse. If we allow ourselves to kind of have stalemates here on water policy, on building housing, we're doing ourselves in. We can't afford to do that right now. I'm not saying that I'm in an adversarial position overall with the federal government, but they are engaging in policies that are completely counter to what we are used to as far as our values go in Hawaii. We're much closer to the mark. Hidano, we have Sierra Kahane, who's just magnificent over at Seaworm. Don Chang is a Hawaiian leader, so is Sierra for that matter. So we have a way of always fighting ourselves, and it's unfortunate because our delays are their gains. When we fight ourselves on conservation, which we will do much better than anyone across the East Coast or in Washington, D.C., we do ourselves a disservice. And we really should be doing things like hiring our own, which is what we're doing, or moving forward on our renewable goals best we can, and not feuding quite so much here.
Sticking on Maui, and as we continue to talk about rebuilding and the importance of federal support, how concerned are you about Maui's ability to rebuild Lahaina, given the instability of what's happening in D.C. and anything we can do to secure funding to ensure that this rebuilding process continues to move forward?
Well, that's why I'm playing nice. $2.2 billion or more is on the line, $1.6 billion of disaster relief money, another $352 million of direct mitigation dollars for water projects, and another $352 million for disaster management. All of those monies are necessary after having a $13 billion disaster. We did settle the lawsuit. People are getting checks. In fact, some people already got their checks. We're going to do a press conference on Friday to talk about, I believe, 16 people, I think, that received significant payouts so they can move on with their lives. Nothing replaces a lost loved one or probably even a home, but this can help. But I'm making sure that we do what we can to work with whomever, I guess, is in the ballpark of our values. I will not be able to compromise on vaccinations because kids will get sick and die. I will be able to compromise on energy programs if they help us as a bridge. I will be able to compromise on disasters because I can't allow our people to suffer. And so it's kind of it's a day-to-day decision. All I can say, and this is why I started here, is we have to be focused on what's right and wrong as leaders, all the governors, all the senators, all the Congress people, and somehow find a little common ground, because these disasters hit red and blue states. These challenges with immigration are in red and blue states. These energy questions affect our entire planet, and we can't be in direct conflict. And so both sides are going to have to meet each other halfway.
You know, sticking with the health policy issues, and I know that's something that you're very passionate about. You were recently in Washington addressing this as well. We've seen measles death now in Texas, and when you talk about 1 in 3 Hawaii residents being reliant on the federal government for health care, what are your concerns about changes in federal policy, what that could mean for us on the ground here when it comes to infectious diseases and just general health?
Well, if they were to pull back on vaccine programs, we'd be in trouble. I'm going to do a whiteboard tomorrow or the next day on this matter, but just so you know, so the outbreak in Texas, which is, making a lot of people sick, killed one child in Texas, one child in New Mexico, as you said, and also remember, a lot of people who get seriously ill from measles also end up with encephalopathy, that's swelling of the brain, and have blindness or deafness or long-term brain damage. It's not a joke. It's very serious. We will vaccinate people and get people covered best we can, but the misinformation was the problem. And Texas is at 93% vaccinated rate, and they had this outbreak through the Mennonite community. We're only at 90%. We're 3% lower than Texas. We are more vulnerable than they are for outbreaks. It's just we didn't have a singular pocket like that where a whole community was not vaccinated. It's very unfortunate that the Health and Human Services Secretary doesn't know anything about healthcare or medicine or social work or nursing, because this is what happens. And frankly, that outbreak is the buildup of many years. This is why I went and opposed Mr. Kennedy's nomination. I also shared with the president and their leadership that he was a bad choice for them, not just for Hawaii or for our vulnerable states, but for the administration. So it's going to be my job as the only physician governor to speak candidly and honestly about our healthcare needs, even understanding that some people have different ideologies. As you know, we had a robust debate about whether vaccines should be mandatory or not, and it did not pass into law, which is totally fine. But that means we have to educate ourselves about the risks, and that's why I'm sharing it with you on this show. We're at risk as a country if we don't use good science. And he's talking about vitamin A and cod liver oil, I believe. That's just not going to cut it when you have outbreaks of measles. You want kids to be well-nourished. That's why you want vitamin A in them. Our people are pretty well-nourished. But when they catch the measles, it's because the virus got them and they didn't have a vaccination.
Have you had any contact or connection with, with the director, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Have you had any conversations with him? And would you be open to sitting at the table with him and sharing maybe some of your concerns as a governor who's a physician and working with someone in the administration?
Absolutely. I would speak with him. Today I spoke with the CEO of United Health, who, they insure, I think, 55 million of our Americans. And we'll work through channels. I, of course, would sit down and speak with him. He avoided me like the plague, if you will. When I was in D.C., I was 6 feet away from him on several occasions, and I don't think he wanted to speak because everyone knows that he's not qualified. He's qualified only from the standpoint of being a celebrity. Hopefully, his team can make up for some of the bad public health policies that he's got. But of course, I'll speak with anybody on these matters. The problem is that's not really what he's interested in. He's interested in his own longstanding agenda. There are actually some things that I like that have come out of his mouth on pesticides and processed foods, but the public health matters are more direct. We'll see. I will go to D.C. every couple months in all likelihood to work on these issues to make sure these relationships are really intact. The relationships built from those 3 trips I had to make to D.C., and they have been very productive. It only took me 2 months, surprisingly, to get straight to the president and have several conversations with his top lieutenants. And that's kind of where I was with President Biden's team as a result of the wildfire.
I'm interested, you're not the only governor who's facing this. And so I would imagine that you are having conversations. You're part of the National Governors Association, obviously. What are the conversations like, as much as you can disclose behind the scenes with your counterparts in other states? Because everyone is weathering this and dealing with their state budgets and trying to figure out what happens at the federal level and how will it impact them.
Yeah, all governors, red state and blue state governors, are deeply concerned about what the cuts will look like and what that will mean to their states and their budgets, all of them. Some of the red state governors have, historically not supported social programs, so they have less vulnerability, but many do, and so they are vulnerable. States like Indiana rely on a lot of these programs. That's just one example. Iowa, another example. So everyone's concerned. Everyone has a different approach. I have decided I'm going to behave in a way that gives us the best chance to have a good collegial relationship to weather some of this storm. And I'm also going to be open-minded to compromise. Certain places, there just is no question. You have to care for kids. You can't put off people's preventive health care, or you pay for it in terrible suffering and cost. And I'll try to be a leader. The other governors, some of them are really wrestling with this because it's up close and personal for them. We're 6 hours different, 5,000 or 6,000 miles away. We're not in each other's grill all day long calling each other names. So I don't have to worry about that. But it's very immediate for a lot of, especially the blue state governors in the East Coast. Also, a lot of people are contemplating their own candidacy for the presidency, and so they're making decisions on whether they can or can't work or should or shouldn't work with the president. I'm pretty focused on Hawaii. Okay, so for me, it's a lot easier because we have these immediate challenges, and we have a population that's more manageable, 1.4 million people. It's very difficult, for example, for California. Gavin is a possible presidential candidate. He's just dealt with at least $50 billion wildfire. He needs the federal government's help, but I think it's safe to say that he and the president don't agree on many things. And so they are, in a more combustible situation. I'm able to take a breath, say a joke to the president or their chief of staff, and then try to move on.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, it's so interesting to speak with you. I want to, we could speak with you for the full hour, but we do want to give Director Tokioka a little bit of time. Just leave us with a parting thought, if you will. People who are watching this, who are seeing, the markets go up and down and the policies change, on the hour. What do you say to Hawaii residents who are watching all this unfold?
I would say be calm. I think our economy is stronger than most, and so we should not see any cuts or significant cuts, I should at least say. So we're going to be fine. I've prepared us for, a bumpy 2 years at least, and I think we're going to be okay. So don't worry about losing your job. We can kind of keep things intact. We are available to hire people if for some reason you've been displaced. Be a little careful with your money because I don't want people to make big reactive decisions. Don't suddenly sell your IRAs. The market will return in spite of what the tariffs are doing right now. Try to just stay calm. We're going to be okay. The country's going to revisit the leadership in 2 years, and I suspect the House of Representatives may shift, and that will create some balance in government again. So take a deep breath. Love Hawaii. Don't do anything too dramatic, and I'll hold the line for as long as I can. But just don't panic. And then I want to say mahalo to Director Tokioka. He did an incredible job helping us get through the wildfires, making sure we housed everybody with our hotel partners. He's exceeded all expectations as a director, and he's very dear to me. So feel free to have at him and tease him. But he did a very good job these last couple years, and he's helping to keep the economy going with me.
Okay, that's a nice tee up to our next guest. Director Tokioka will be with us right after the break. Thank you again, Governor, for being here. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Spotlight. Now we continue on in our conversation, focusing in on Hawaii's economy. Again, we want to encourage all of you watching to insert your comments and questions for our guests, and we'll get to as many as we can throughout the show.
And joining us now is our next guest, the head of DBED, Director Jimmy Tokioka, is joining us here live. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Yanji.
So I want to sort of, building on what the governor shared with us, talking about the economy overall, when you have such fluctuations in federal policy, not even day to day, hour by hour, it feels like, how do you plan, how do you forecast, and what are you anticipating as the impacts for Hawaii?
Well, when you develop a solid plan, you know there's going to be changes. Now, just an example is coming to this show, part of what I was going to talk about was the tariffs and Canada. And I had a whole bunch of comments, bullet points on that. And then now it may not happen. So, we still have to be prepared for it because you never know what's going to happen. I think we've seen that. But I think, as far as the economy is concerned, and when we're talking about the changes in the federal government, we have to be prepared for what does this new administration want to see happen in the states, all of the states, and in Hawaii. And if you listen to his speech on 2 weeks ago, you heard him talking a lot about shipyards. We're going to build ships. Pearl Harbor is a great place to do that, and we've done it before. So, we haven't done it, in a while to the extent that we used to do it. So, our macro office, Lori Moore and John Green, they're focusing on how can we get connected with all of the resources that we've had in our congressional delegation to make that happen. So, we just have to kind of shift to see where support is going to come, and you see in the military, you see in transportation. I know Director Sniffen is thinking the same strategy, is like, what is this administration looking for? And certainly they're looking at, capital improvement projects and things like that that move the economy forward. So, we can adjust and adapt to that. I think that's incumbent upon us to do that.
What else do you think are the other factors when looking at Hawaii's economic growth and maybe some of the things that are forecasted? And with the legislative session currently going on right now, what are there any other initiatives that you are really trying to promote and push for in just preparing for what's to potentially come in ways that we can continue to grow Hawaii's economy?
Yes. Okay. So I know I saw you in Japan at the U.S. Council, and that's coming to Hawaii in October. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to sell Hawaii to the Japanese market. One program like that, I was at the Honolulu Festival this weekend, and when I go back and I look at the passenger count that came from Japan during Honolulu Festival, we were up in certain airports 20%, 10%. We were up in all of the different arrivals during that week. So, that's a good thing. And next year is the 30th anniversary. We're trying to develop other types of events. Like, I think I said it on the last time I was on the show. There's 2 million hula dancers in Japan. That's more than the state of Hawaii. So capitalizing on, an event, not necessarily a competition, but inviting them to come to Hawaii for, Japanese Mary Monarch. To that extent, not to that extent, but something along that line. Ukulele players, to connect to the Honolulu Festival and make it bigger. If the Japanese market was pre-COVID, the state would be in good shape right now. But we also need to be prepared for the other things that have happened throughout the last 6 months, 8 months with the change in the federal government. Ways and Means Chair Donovan Dela Cruz forecasted a potential of a $450 million shortfall. He's in the numbers all the time. So we think that's an accurate number to be prepared for, but we need to adjust and attract new business. The Japanese market, we need to get them back. If they were back, we would be in good shape. So that's still going to be a focus. The governor just sent down a governor's message 2 weeks ago about an additional $3 million for marketing in Japan. And some people might say, well, the yen is too weak. Why do you continue to do that? Because they need to know that we still have faith in their economy to rebound and for them to come back to Hawaii because they are so close to Hawaii. So that's That's what we focus on, or are part of the focus on right now, and as well as other Asian markets. Representative Quinlan and Senator DeCoit, the Chinese Taiwan market is big for them. They were on some trade missions there, and I think they're going to come through with some good events that come to Hawaii.
I want to ask you about marketing Hawaii. There's a question here in the comments from Paul that I want to ask and kind of build on. And Paul says, in 2023, the DBED was considering dissolving HTA. Where does this stand today? I can't imagine that you're looking to dissolve HTA, but there has been some back and forth on the compensation of the CEO, what that ought to be. You are advocating for much lower than was originally posted. Sort of what is your thought about the future of this agency and specifically looking at the leadership there?
Well, it's not a secret. There have been some board meetings that were contentious, because everybody's passionate about what they do. I grew up in the industry. I started as a busboy. I became a general manager. So it's not like I'm unfamiliar with the industry, unfamiliar with marketing, because I had to run hotels that had to market the properties. So I think that over the years, the situation at HTA, they had so many exemptions, procurement exemptions, and for them to have changed after the legislature changed the exemptions and it changed the direction that the organization had to move to, it was a little difficult for them to adapt. And so when you have a vice president of finance, Isaac Choi, who was the former tax director and a former legislator, and understanding what procurement is, it's very strict. And the part of that is I'm the chief procurement officer for all of the agencies in DBED. So when something goes wrong, even if I had nothing to do with it, it's my fault. So I need to make sure that there's oversight. And when things don't happen, we need to take action and correct them. And I don't like doing that. I don't like to be the guy who comes in and says, this is wrong, this is wrong. But I do know this. I do know that the legislature checks, and they will go through receipt by receipt. And I don't want to be on the other side of the table and how come you didn't know about that? And how come you guys did this? And rightfully so. They are the bank. The legislature is the bank, and we need to make sure that we have their trust. And I've said that many, many times. When you talk about the salary, the governor and I had a conversation about that, and his position was that the CEO shouldn't make more than the lieutenant governor. And I agreed with that. I said, okay, we'll move with that. But if the salary increases pass, then that salary will go up to 216 in the first year. And then there's another bill moving that would give the president and CEO medical benefits and retirement benefits that was never part of the package before. So the package is actually going to be better now if the salary increases pass than it was before. So let's just clear the air on that. And it's not something that we're going to change and say, no, we can't do that because now the package changed. No, it is what the governor said it should be, and that's what it will be.
I want to follow up on another issue that the governor talked about, and that's Aloha Stadium. We heard from him about his efforts to maybe bring in outside partners to help provide some funding, and recognizing where costs have now gone to, and with the estimates that continue to rise. And we hear from the governor that he wants something more than just a modest stadium.
Oh, yeah.
Your thoughts overall on where things are, and just the overall timeline and confidence that this is going to be moving forward in as quickly as possible.
Okay, so the only thing I would caution is as quickly as possible, because when the governor talked about it, when they were doing the estimates for the cost of the project, that was 6 years ago, as you mentioned, and the costs have increased since then. And by the time we start building the stadium, by the time we start putting shovels in the ground, it'll be at least another year or two from now. And so it's going to be more expensive. The $350 million is not going to get us a quality stadium. And so the governor has been all hands on deck trying to figure out ways to raise money, trying to figure out how we can do these partnerships. And he's so passionate about this project. Look at what he did with Mark and the Benioff family. He got them to put money into the healthcare systems in Hawaii. So I am never going to question his ability to come up with additional resources, because I sit in a lot of meetings with him, and he is very good at selling Hawaii. I can tell you this, in all honesty, when we started in the House together, he was one term before me. We didn't even have very little connections, but I give him a lot of credit. He works hard. And, if he thinks he's going to do something, he will do everything he can to do it. And I'm fortunate that we get to work with him. I think he has a great team, and I'm pretty sure we're going to figure out the stadium. It just might not be as quick as we wanted it to be, because if there's additional monies that come down the line and it's going to take a little longer, I'd rather wait a little longer than rush it because there's $350 million sitting there and not get a quality product. So that's my position, and I'm not speaking as somebody who is Stanford Carr or the board chair, Brendan Morioka. And Brendan, I will say, he was here with me on the last show. That guy is awesome. He has steered this ship, and I tell him that all the time. I wish he could stay, but his term's up in June. And I'm sure he's not going to run away, but he has been incredibly resourceful in this project, and we're looking forward to making this happen.
So when you talk about a delay, and this is Ryan's area of expertise much more than mine when it comes to athletics, but what does that mean for the University of Hawaii's football schedule and the promises that have been made in terms of how long they can play at UH temporarily and the guarantees that they have given the conference?
Okay, I was told 2 weeks ago that the length of time that they have to play in Ching Field has been extended to 2032. We're not shooting for 2032, but that is what I was told. The NCAA said, currently we understand you're building a new stadium. We will give you to 2032 to get the right footprint and allow you to be in a Division I football program. So that relieves a lot of the stress about rushing something. But still, as the governor said, we want to make sure that the people in the state of Hawaii and have a quality stadium. We all talk about, whether it was Bruno Mars in the stadium. I mean, people I don't know how fast Bruno Mars sold out, but it was incredible. So that's what we need. We need something like that. Aloha Stadium was 50,000. We know we can't afford that, but I think we can afford something in the 35,000 range.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I just want to quickly ask about other sectors of our economy. And we recently did a show about the film industry and their efforts to really try to bring more production to Hawaii. Do you see this as an industry that can continue to grow? And how much of that could be impacted by policy that could happen this legislative session?
Absolutely. And I want to put a shout out to Senator DeCoit for the last few years. She's been really focused on the film industry, spending a lot of time looking at ways to make it better, the tax credits. And for myself personally, I met with a lot of Hollywood producers, and they follow the tax credits. Right now we have a $50 million tax credit, and there's caps of $17 million for each production. When they come, that's the most that they can get off of a tax credit. We have a rollover on the money, so if we spend too much in one year, you can take the money from the previous year and roll it into the year that you're in, and that really helps with the tax credits. Some at the legislature don't think that a tax credit is the answer, but for me personally, and I've shared that with them, I meet with people a lot, and the producers, they follow the tax credits. And if we want the Jason Momoas and the Dwayne Johnsons to come to Hawaii, which when they talk to producers that pitch a show to them, they tell them they want to go to Hawaii, but the tax credit is a big incentive for that to happen too.
Well, I'm sure we'll have you back before the session is over. We are out of time now, but thank you so much for being here. We covered a lot of ground. Good to see you as always.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, a busy show today as we caught up with Governor Josh Green and DBED Director Jimmy Tokioka, really focusing in on how the tariffs and the impact of what's happening in Washington, D.C. could impact here in Hawaii. The governor sounding pretty confident for the next few years that he, as he says, is able to navigate through some of the challenges that might be coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and you heard from DBED Director Jimmy Tokioka about some of the areas they're trying to explore, investing more in Japan to try to keep that market strong in Hawaii, and just a lot of sort of uncertainty, but really navigating through that. Next week, our guest will be Congresswoman Jill Tokura and the Lieutenant Governor, along with Carl Bonham from UHERO. So we'll be talking about a lot of the same subjects, but with a very different perspective.
Yeah, great to get an update on everything that's happening in Washington, D.C. We thank you for tuning in. Again, you can catch the full interview on HawaiiNewsNow.com and join us next week. And again, always engage in the conversations online as well. We leave you now with a kind of overcast shot of beautiful Hilo Bay. We'll see you next week. Aloha.
Aloha.